For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.
Today on the show, I've got Jason Jedlinski, head of consumer products at Gannett and the USA Today network. Jason and I take on the subject of content, and I feel like there's probably no one better to speak to content than someone that is responsible for the consumer products that we see and one of the largest publishers of news and information in the US. Today, we talk about the atomization of content, and he'll explain what we mean by that, how to organize it, and the types of technology that they're deploying at USA Today Network, as well as, the content monetization plays that are out in the marketplace and where we see things going. And of course, we get to talk a little bit more about Jason, his background, and where he sees the future. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jason. Well, Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
It's great to have you here. Let's get started with your background, where you started your career and what's been the path to Gannett and the USA Today network.
Sure. I started my career in TV news. I was a TV news writer, producer, assignment editor, and after a few years moved over onto the digital content side. That led me, after complaining enough about our content management system, by default into a product role where they said, go ahead and fix it. And that led to a great career with Tribune Company, both on the newspaper and broadcast side. In 2013, I took a detour into ad tech. I realized I just wanted to know more about the business model and have exposure to the media agencies who were buying advertising and funding the websites that I built and worked on. And after about 3 years in that space, came back to publishing here at Gannett.
Nice. Well, and, tell me a little bit about your current role at Gannett and USA Today. What are you responsible for? What's under your domain?
Sure. Largely speaking, it's everything that consumers see from our brands that is not in print. So our websites, our mobile applications, the way we interact with social media, search engine optimization, our content management system that creates and distributes the content, all of the mechanics, plumbing, templates, everything from design to software engineering to operations. I'm not responsible for the content strategy or the revenue strategy, but the product and technology that powers it.
Wow, that's a big scope. Any, you started off in broadcast, went to ad tech, back to journalism, I guess, or media. Any pivotal twists along the ways or mentors that stand out in that career path?
Yeah, both. Absolutely. 2006 was that pivotal twist. It's funny you describe it that way. It really was. I approached Tribune Broadcasting very much expecting to stay on my career path of TV news and pitched them on a role, sort of coordinating investigations and special projects across a group of 20 plus TV stations. And they said, actually, we're scaling back and closing some of our newsrooms, so that really doesn't make sense strategically for us. But why don't you go down to the basement, literally the basement, and talk to our web guys? We don't know what to do with our websites. And it was from that conversation with a Tribune Broadcasting executive that, ultimately led me on a product and technology path. I was always interested in computers. I have a high school classmate to thank for bringing me onto the web in 94, before there were images and before there were modern browsers. So I was always savvy about these things, but it was that conversation as I pitched a dramatically different job that led me down this path. And the guy who hired me and took a chance on me in that role at Tribune Interactive, Scott Anderson, was absolutely my mentor, mostly from a management and leadership style. A lot of what I do today and pride myself on today are things that I learned from him in my first few years of management.
That's great. Well, tell us a little bit about the USA Today network. I mean, most people that are going to be listening to this should know USA Today, the banner, right? But What is the network? Tell us some more about that.
Sure. It is our go-to-market name for Gannett, which is a leading local to national media and marketing solutions company. We're the largest local media company in America. We have 100 newsrooms covering 34 states, and our brands reach half of the digital population in the U.S., including more millennials than BuzzFeed, which you wouldn't necessarily expect when you're talking about what you think of as a newspaper company. So, our hard-hitting enterprise and investigative reporting won 3 Pulitzer Prizes last year, but we offer consumers a lot more than the news. We have foodblogs.com in the recipe space. We have reviewed.com in the product review space. We've got a number of different consumer-facing brands, and our mission is to become essential both to consumers and businesses who are seeking meaningful connections in their communities. And on the business side, we have a marketing solutions branch of the company, and its go-to-market brand is Local IQ. That's really focused on offering performance for small and medium-sized businesses in our community. So we've gone from being, selling column inches and print and banners on our own websites to a marketing solutions company that now, through a couple of recent acquisitions, we're the world's largest reseller of Google AdWords. So we sell more paid search than anyone else on the planet.
Wow. That's quite the broadening, I guess, from what I traditionally thought of USA Today, like you said, was a newspaper business or a news business. You're in the digital content business for a large and marketing solutions to your
Absolutely.
speak. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you recently gave a talk on the atomization of content, and content in itself is a big topic, and you're playing in that space. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by atomization of content and how you think about it.
Sure. It's somewhat controversial, especially coming from a journalism and storytelling background, but the article or the TV news story, either way, doesn't make a great container for information. We have to find ways to demonstrate our expertise in response to questions. So yes, there are people that come to our homepage of the Indianapolis Star, the Detroit Free Press, and say, what's going on in my town today? Tell me the headlines, tell me the news. But for every one of those, there's probably 10 people who have a question. When is that tollway going to be finished? Or what time is something coming on TV? What day are the Oscars this year? And in that scenario, whether it's a search engine, whether it's a voice interface, it's a winner-take-all dynamic. And you can even extend that to e-commerce and non-news or publishing brands. You could imagine asking Siri, what's the cheapest Marriott hotel in Midtown Manhattan for January 17th? Marriott.com will sculpt you down this whole path of upsells and trying to guess and optimize where you're going to spend your money. In a question and answer world, whether voice or typing it into Google, that control over the user and the user interface is gone. So if we want to compete in that kind of a world, we have to make our content bite-sized so that if you're looking for what our food critic in Phoenix thought about the best taco restaurants in town, that can surface wherever and whenever you're asking that, not that you'd have to go find that on an article in the food section of azcentral.com. So it's a pretty dramatic way of thinking about the way we structure our reporting and our information to go from things that get printed on paper and then recycled to sort of a living, breathing Wikipedia-like set of knowledge.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, what I'm envisioning is kind of like this digitization, you take the old school newspaper, right? And you're looking at it and you've got an article and it's got an embedded listing for a restaurant, like you just said, like maybe it's a review. And now you're breaking those two things apart so they can live independently from each other, but be together in the appropriate medium at the appropriate time. Is that what you mean?
It's true right now, and this is common across the industry. So you could look at New York Times or CNN or Washington Post, and we're all embedding media, photos, videos, podcasts. We're embedding them into articles, and those articles live on sections. And it's a very analog, comparison to the way journalism and media was done for, the large part of the last century. Having those photos, having those videos tagged in a way that they can be discovered and surfaced and brought up to the surface at relevant times is the sort of the future of where we're going from a content creation and management standpoint.
That's great. Well, so tell us there's a lot of implications here to how we think about creating and organizing content. What are the big ones for you? What are you thinking about?
I think it's really thinking about how we can leverage the information we gather and the expertise we have and democratize it and make it accessible, as broadly as possible. And how can we bring the wisdom of the crowd in to augment that and make it better and help point us towards stories that, should be told? If you think about what Waze did versus MapQuest or MapBlast, or if you think about what Yelp did versus just restaurant listings, it's that information and input from the community that brought them to the next level. So just as we're, breaking up our content into these molecular elements, we also need to find ways to get feedback loops with the people reading and consuming and interacting with that content to further make it relevant. Our company mission before becoming essential to businesses and people in our communities was to help communities connect, act, and thrive. And I think that same mission, which, is very much part of our DNA as a local media company, applies to any consumer-facing digital business, is bringing people together in tribes of common interests or passions or curiosity. And that has as you said, dramatic implications to how we create and organize our content.
I like it. And it's those examples too of Waze and Yelp, leveraging the wisdom of the crowd, so to speak. You're creating data through additional data on top of your core content to, create more, what am I looking for? More intelligence, more knowledge that people are looking and searching for.
Yeah, it should be a virtuous cycle and a machine and a feedback loop that keeps growing. On election night, the New York Times had a map that just said, "How are you feeling?" And you picked from a few different smiley faces, and you had this ribbon of real time, faces and emotions happening across the U.S. painted in color. That is content in and of its own right, even though it's not a headline, byline, lead paragraph of a traditional article.
Right. Well, and it's an evolution of journalism in many respects. It's fascinating. Well, what are you doing at USA Today Network along these lines? Like, give me some examples. I know. Sure. I think you talked about a election night example prior when we talked, but give me some examples.
Sure. I mean, the first thing is really adding geolocation to the content we're creating. So getting very precise with how we're tagging and indexing that content. There's been explosive growth. I think Mary Meeker's latest report cited a wild figure of just how much near me searches are increasing on Google. So not just pizza, but pizza near me. So that geolocation will let us respond to those queries, but also create experiences that use augmented reality where you may point your camera at a block where you're thinking of renting an apartment, and we can tell you the things that happened there. So, really leveraging location in different ways. We're doing really neat work with sentiment and extracting using natural language processing, just trying to group and bundle and index content in different ways. How did that story make you feel? What emotions did it prompt? And do you want more of that happy cry, for example, that you get from a feel-good story? The election example we talked about previously uses technology. I won't get into the weeds of it, but it's called GraphQL, and it's a different way of approaching structured metadata or APIs. Getting around all the nerdy tech underneath, what it lets us do is, without having programmers go in and set up interactive experiences, we can empower our journalists to say something like, show me all of the first-time congressional candidates and how they're doing at 10 o'clock on election night. And we take our feed of data from the AP and what we know about those races, and boom, there you have a table and chart that's showing you how all first-time candidates are doing. If you're Sears, for example, and you want to say, show me all washing machines with an Energy Star rating of X and a price below Y, that's fairly standard with an e-commerce system, but this technology would let you then say, and I also want to add a filter for dimensions or color, and really do that in a fast and flexible way.
Well, one of the things is just kind of follow on that front, and the technology, the underpinnings, if you will, the technology that make this work. You're exploring a lot of different avenues. Have you had to bring new talent into the organization to do that? And what are what's the hardest talent to find if you were to, put one out there?
I think it's probably universal, but data science and people who are equipped to build the models, to draw the conclusions, to identify the patterns, to help, in our example with subscriptions, create audience segments that help us understand who's more likely to subscribe or who's more valuable to serve programmatic ads to. That big data talent, and I'm generalizing, but that is, in demand by every industry everywhere, and certainly a challenge to recruit. And we've made some great hires in that space.
Interesting. Well, where do you think this is going to be headed? Maybe over maybe the short term and then maybe long term. You can pick the number of years you want to talk about, but just curious where you think it is going.
Yeah, I think about those AT&T commercials directed by David Fincher, back in 1993, and the "Have you ever?" Well, you will, and the company that will do it is AT&T. It was 25 years ago, and we were watching, the Cosby Show or whatever we were watching on TV, and things like electronic tolls or video chats felt like science fiction. Right. I mean, if you think about the progression of TV Guide, not just from the paper, but to that scrolling channel that then had commercials put on top, and then got to be your on-demand or click around DVR, to then Comcast has the voice remote, or now you can just say, Alexa, go record, Big Bang Theory. It's hard to even imagine where we're going, but I think voice is really the accelerator for us. We started using a mouse in 1984. We started swiping with the iPhone in 2007. And I'm confident that voice, and it doesn't just mean talking to a smart speaker. It's integrated a lot of places now and will be even more places in 12 months. But we can use voice to remove the remaining friction in transactions, driving more intimate connections, deeper loyalty and engagement. I mean, we're raising a generation of kids who are just talking to speakers as though it's normal. And there's a reason they take so naturally to that interface. It's just in our DNA. It's human. Don Hewitt, the creator of 60 Minutes, famously said, there's 4 words every child knows. Tell me a story. And we're in the storytelling business. All marketers are in the storytelling business. And I think voice equips us to do that in really interesting ways. Google and Amazon and others will work through a lot of the messy logistics where, Siri or Alexa doesn't understand your question today. It's incumbent upon us as content creators and marketers to be able to be there and be ready with the answers. I liken it to a lot of what I saw, in high school as I first discovered the web, and as graphics started to be supported in the first web browsers. Museums like the Louvre put entire collections online in 1995 or 96. Those pioneers produced arguably some of the best branded content before that was ever a word. Jeep's website probably should have been the digital equivalent of Field and Stream magazine, because that's their demographic and that's what they're appealing to. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, especially as revenue models take shape. We're going to see a lot more of that exploration and just let's try something with the strongest and most interesting content we have. And I think it'll be a renaissance in digital content over the next few years as, the best publishers and content creators really think through the target audience's eyes, leverage the, jobs to be done framework that we use in product, which says you're not just buying a skateboard, you're buying this thrilling rebel experience, getting outdoors and, being your own person. What are you actually seeking when you ask a question or try to get content? I think over the next, 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a lot of things that are not the traditional, conventional, let's recreate radio on my Google Home, but things that really go further.
I like where you're going, and voice has been a topic I've covered before with others. And I think the people that I find the most worried about it are the traditional consumer packaged goods companies, right? And I think it's probably the Alexa, Amazon effect of Alexa, buy batteries, and they most likely are going to recommend Amazon Basic batteries, not Duracell, right? So it feels like voice. I don't know if you agree with this, but I'd love your opinion. Do you feel like voice, it's right now, it's kind of an arms race, like who can get there quick to establish a presence and a capability, if you will, in that space?
I don't think enough companies are approaching it with that urgency, but I do think, especially given the winner take all dynamic of you're not getting a page of search results back, you're getting an answer back or a recording back. It's something that probably most people are under invested in. You know, to your point on the brand recognition front, I think that has, you know, dramatic consequences for brand advertising, just upper funnel brand awareness for Duracell in your battery example, or Charmin toilet paper. That has implications that stretch into television, radio, newspaper, you know, forget digital display, even larger segments of media buying. And I think, you know, it'll be interesting to see what that does to, you know, those marketers will still have a message, but how it changes, you know, what the message is.
Right. Okay. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about monetization. You're in the publishing business, or at least part of your business is in publishing. And there's been some success with digital subscriptions, you know, the paywalls and the like, as advertising just hasn't, I don't think it's kept up with what it needs to do, right, to support the journalistic endeavors. And that's my commentary on this, is that ad fraud is to blame. And it's, you know, otherwise, if it didn't exist as permanent as it is, I think all publishers would have higher CPMs, have more money to do what they need to do. And money would be going to quality content creators. But that's my aside. It seems like there's been some success with these subscription models, but how do you feel the way forward of monetizing, you know, your vast content libraries? What do you see the future being?
Well, we're certainly investing a lot of effort and energy in building recurring revenue relationships with more of our readers, especially in digital. So if you're someone that comes to us regularly, appreciates our content, likes our columnists, recognizes and knows our brand, there should be some cost to that other than, you know, the eyeballs for advertising. And so we're working to develop more of those relationships and really seeing great growth in our digital subscription packages as a result. We know there's an even larger pool of people who won't necessarily pay a monthly subscription, but would enjoy some feature or benefit that they see value in. And I think that freemium model where there's an ad-supported taste, and yes, there's a subscription path at the other end of the scale, there's a meaty middle where there are features, compelling features, much like Amazon Prime's 2-day free shipping, that opt you into a model where you're not just paying to get through a paywall, but you're paying for some exclusive advantage or access. You know, there's a lot of things that just as, you know, stewards in our communities, whether it's behind the scenes, whether it's, you know, attending a city council meeting with our reporter, going to the ball game with our senior sports writer, you know, those sort of like high school auction money can't buy experiences that parents donate. Those are things that we could reward our readers with. So we're expanding into a fair number of offline components or companions to our digital content experience, while also trying to identify what are those must-have features. If you think about, you know, Spotify, it's downloading your music so you can enjoy it when you're offline. If you're thinking of a dating app like Tinder, it's the ability to block people or the ability to get more matches. Those are the things that once you're in, you're sucked in, you really want it. And if someone asks you for a few dollars, it seems like a reasonable, you know, value exchange. So I think as much as we're aggressively growing our subscription base, there's even more opportunity to have that feature-driven benefit relationship.
Interesting. Where do you see digital advertising fitting in? And do you feel like digital advertising needs to evolve?
Yes, it fits in, absolutely. And yes, it needs to evolve. So we could have a whole separate conversation on ad fraud and things like that. But I will agree with you that the more media buying agencies understand that premium publishers offer a degree of trust and context and, you know, quality audience, quality environment, you know, the better we'll all be. But yeah, that's a separate tangent. Advertising in general, there will always be volume plays. We see USA Today, that flagship brand, in that vein. I think it's unlikely that we'd put a paywall or a subscription model in place on USA Today. Premium features, membership, sure, but it will be an ad-supported experience first and foremost. It's about, the paper was founded in 1982 as a way to, to unite the country and bring people together. So, there's a great opportunity there for us to help marketers tell their stories in new ways. And we have a number of proprietary ad units and creative specs that really help weave the message in with our content. Marketers' in-house studios are doing amazing work. The things you see, at some of these awards from the Ad Week, Ad Age side of things, it's incredible. They make me, harken back to when I was a TV news producer and how I would have loved to have access to, the nurse who helped, give the woman give birth to quintuplets or whatever it might be, right? Those are the things you really work to get and scoop as a reporter, but as the hospital chain or as the, whatever the industry, they're your employees and that's your in-house PR story. So we're seeing a lot of great work there that's not traditional quote unquote advertising that we can help amplify in creative ways, make meaningful connections with our loyal audience, much like you'd introduce to friends or connections. And where we see our niche is, we're focusing on marketing solutions efforts on helping small and medium-sized businesses do that in our communities. Imagine the relevance that comes with a story about the Little League champions in a suburb of Rochester and what we could do for a dry cleaner in that neighborhood. That the people reading about this Little League team are likely in driving distance of this dry cleaner, and what are the ways that you positively associate the two together. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to sort of breathe new life into what the traditional digital ad or ad tech model has been. I love attending the ANA's Masters of Marketing conference, and this year it was talk of authentic storytelling, what one of the CMOs described as co-creating shared meaning with their consumers, totally trumped all discussion of data and targeting and technology. And I thought, again, a renaissance of good ad creative and messaging and relevance versus, trying to target to the nth degree.
Right. Well, and I love your example of the dry cleaner and the Little League team, because when I think about USA Today, and even the Gannett network of newspapers, is the community aspect or the local angle. It seems like it's always been present in USA Today as reporting, and it strikes right down the middle, if you will. When the president complains about the liberal media, I don't think of USA Today. I think of other titles. I think of you guys as representing all of the nation. I don't know if that's true, if that's how you see it, but.
Yeah, that's absolutely the way we approach it. Is we try to take a voice that appeals to Main Street and really making local national. So how do we take our boots on the ground, our reporters in communities like Salinas, California, that had the terrible wildfires? We have people that live in that community, lost homes in that community, send their kids to school in that community. Their stories on the pages of USA Today, we think, beat an anonymous byline of someone who parachuted in for a day or left. Same thing with our Florida properties and the hurricanes. We tell the story once Anderson Cooper flies back to New York about rebuilding the power grid and getting everything back online. And we believe it's a different and distinct voice.
Interesting. Well, let's shift gears entirely, because what I usually love to do is to talk about the person as well that I'm talking to, because listeners, I think, like the backstory. So in that effort, I love asking people this question: is there an experience of your past that defines or makes up who you are today?
Wow. Defines. No pressure. Yeah. There's something that immediately came to mind, which was funny. It's an old story, but in grade school, I started a newspaper, and this was back in the days where I ran a mimeograph machine and got purple ink on my hands. But I was always ran a family newsletter. It was always kind of journalism in my blood. And at that time, I didn't know the words. I didn't know what I was doing, but it was my intent was to give voice to those not in the inner circle who sat at the cool kids table at lunch, and, inclusion, diversity, new perspectives, all those great things. But, I was a sixth grader. And when first issue came out, I got criticized. And honestly, I don't even remember what it was. I just remember there was snarkiness and things going around. What I do remember is my favorite teacher wrote wrote me a letter that I can still quote verbatim 30 years later, saying, basically, ignore the haters. You'll never know how much you did for kids you've never met. A first grader who now has the confidence to write more. An eighth grader who's never been recognized for anything in their 10 years at this school. You've given them a chance to shine. And that pivot on what otherwise was a, kind of typical, junior high nasty situation, definitely sticks with me.
That's a fantastic story, and what a foreshadowing to where you are now.
Yeah,
creating new products for journalists. So, well, what fuels you? What drives you personally? Teaching and helping people learn and develop. I really define my job, especially leading, teams as large as I've had the privilege to lead over the last 10 years of my career. My job is to help them be as successful as possible. It's not a top down do this, but it's nurturing and encouraging and bringing the ideas up into the surface and being an advocate and a champion for our talent. And more than any redesign or revenue growth story or award, my proudest accomplishment are the people I've mentored. QA engineer who tested, software code that, is now running product at Tumblr. It's people that I had the good fortune of crossing paths with and helped along their journey that, I'm happy to have as my legacy. That's great. And, are there brands or causes that you follow or you think others should be taking notice of?
Sure. American Express is masterful. I think the CMO, Elizabeth Rutledge, she's done great work on their global brand platform. I thought it was genius when they offered to replace NBA jerseys that you bought with Amex should your player get traded to another team. I mean, just, their slogan is the powerful backing of American Express, right? And that it's more than a card and they've got your back. Well, how perfect. I mean, yes, it's this whole great co-branded thing with the NBA, but you buy a jersey, your player gets traded. Don't worry, we'll give you the new jersey for the new team. It's genius. And, how often is that probably used? How often does someone really have the receipt? I mean, it doesn't cost them a lot in the long run, but it's this just emotional punch that makes so much sense. Less outside of the Fortune 500, I guess. Buffer and their CEO, Joel Gascoigne, is just a model of transparency. The salaries for every single person at the company, their monthly and quarterly revenue and expenses, everything is put out there, to the world, as a blueprint to other software as a service, startups, but just because that's how he believes. And so he's great to follow on Twitter. Same with the guys running Basecamp, Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansen.
Yeah.
I think, again, in terms of companies to follow or take notice of, these are people who do, just really well by their customer and walk the walk and practice what they preach. In my industry, the two things I generally recommend are Neiman Journalism Lab out of Harvard and the Reuters Institute out of Oxford. Both do, great research and great insights into the future of digital content and publishing. The Reuters Institute just a few months ago released a report that really chronicles in the most detailed way I've ever seen the relationship people have with Siri, Alexa, Google Home, what they're asking when they wake up, what they do when they go to bed. And it just gives a great picture into how people are interacting with those devices.
Wow. Well, those are great. Those are great examples. Well, last question for you, and then I'll let you go. What do you see for the future of marketing? What does it look like to you?
Well, I approach that from a product perspective of how can digital experiences best support marketers' ambitions. And as marketers are shifting, not moving away from programmatic or performance media, but as marketers are shifting to telling their story. Again, let's go back to your Duracell example and what happens when, Alexa is going to give you Amazon batteries instead. Marketers are sort of saying, look, we've pursued conversion to the extreme. And this was actually eBay's CMO, Susie Deering, at that same ANA conference. She was talking about how they moved from performance targeting that said, basically you looked at baseball cards, so we're going to follow you around the web with more baseball cards, to eBay's retail revival initiative, very much in line with Gannett and local communities. Their tagline is Main Street happens here. And so they've, basically ran campaigns positioning themselves as helping small businesses and about fueling your passions and engagement, inspiration, discovery, and the bigger differentiators of why you would use eBay. A number of CMOs have talked about the importance of agility in growing their organizations, embracing iterative test and learn processes, much as we do with site features or app features and product development, cross-functional teams where you have copywriters, developers, even lawyers all working side by side in 2-week sprints where they're trying something, putting it out there, trying something, putting it out there. So I think the future of marketing from a publisher product perspective is we're finding ways to break out of the traditional IAB standard double-click served banner ads and taking branded content, sponsored content to the next level of really, helping co-create those brand defining experience and moments and do what we do best from a storytelling perspective and help engage our audiences. There's ways to do that through affiliate partnerships. There's ways to do that through strategic marketing partnerships. But I think you'll see much more, kind of keeping with this winner take all approach of publications aligning with brands who share their values and share their way of thinking about consumers and the world and purpose, and really pairing up rather than a media buy that might be spread across 50 websites or, programmatically buckshot to 1,000, 10,000 websites based on a cookie or what a cookie thinks you're interested in.
I love it. And I doubly love it because I always think of USA Today as one of the more innovative titles in journalism, with the infographics that they've introduced to, ads on the front page, which were like a no-no for a long time. And so I'm really excited to see that you're still innovating and driving. A lot of companies lose that as they get bigger.
Yeah, we're proud. The recent example, augmented reality. We worked with our newspaper in Florida to take viewers on the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center. Last year, we invested a great deal of storytelling effort in exploring the southern border with everything Trump's talking about the wall, and certainly relevant now with the government shutdown. We flew in a helicopter with infrared and radar and mapped, where there's canyons and the border basically is like a giant chasm a mile wide already. That's not something you typically get. The ability to go over all, 200 some miles. We rented helicopters and went up with all kinds of specialized gear and did 3D, AR and VR experiences. So it's a real privilege to be at a company that continues to invest in that. And we're excited to extend that to advertisers. We did a campaign with Nest where we put their smoke detectors in a burning house at a firefighter training site. And we showed what happens inside the house as we talked about the features of the Nest smoke detector. And that was a 360, like you're standing in the room experience.
I love it. Well, Jason, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. It's been fascinating. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So happy to be here. And thanks for the opportunity.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me, with writing and editing by Kevin Greeley, social media support by Megan Woods, art and graphic design by Sarah Dell. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about the show.
I love to hear from listeners, and you can contact me at marketingtodaypodcast.com. There you'll also find complete show notes with links to anything we talk about on any episode. You can also search our archives.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.